why don't you start by telling us about your journey into Chinese Taoism, Taoist practice?
Okay, right. Okay, I'm going to correct you on the Taoist bit shortly. Okay, this is like the first mistake people make is they will classify me as a Taoist, which is not strictly accurate. Okay, which I'll explain later. Okay, so how did my journey begin? Which is a really good question, because the path really is the journey and not the goal itself. So realistically, it started for me when I was a child, like many people who are attracted to magic or mysticism, religion to a certain extent, I had many childhood experiences, which I won't discuss fully at the moment, but they brought me to an understanding that there is more to this physical reality than than you're taught at school, for example, science classes and everything. And I wanted to explore that reality. So my first steps were non-Chinese. As a Westerner, born in the United Kingdom, my first experiences were with what I would call Western occultism. So I was studying we have basically a kind of magical tradition in the West, which I would call Hermeticism.
Yeah. We're well aware of that in
okay.
Taiwan.
And so this is where I began. I studied the Hermetic tradition, and I took several routes, like the normal ones, like the Golden Dawn, and Wicca, I guess, was another one I studied. And later on, I was doing Thelema and other systems. But really, at the end of the day, I went back to the more ancient roots of Western magic, which would be like essentially Egyptian or Neoplatonic, which is like a combination of Greek and Egyptian mysteries. How did that lead to Chinese magic is a really good question. Okay, at the same time as this, I was a martial artist. I studied wushu.
Which kind?
I did several. I started off with Tai Liu Fo. Yeah, which is like a Nan Guan system.
Okay.
Sun boxing, if you like, for English audiences. And later Yung Chun, which is like
everyone knows Yung Chun.
Ip Man and all that.
Yeah.
So I studied these systems, and so by studying the Chinese systems, one thing led to another. So it started off very physical, like many traditions. There is a physical basis, or there should be, I think, which ties your physicality to spirituality. You'll see it in yoga and shamanism, through dance and movement. And I started researching the origins of martial arts. And that brought me back to a practice called Shengong. Shengong, which is a rough translation for my Western audiences and some Chinese. Shen kind of means God or spirit. Gong means skill.
Yeah.
So in my research, I found martial arts were originally a form of possession dance, similar to Wudong or something like that. To give an example, it's a shamanic ritual, to bring the rains and things like this.
Yeah.
Not only that, Chinese martial arts, as I said, it starts off with a physical level, the level of the warrior, if you like.
Yeah.
And then it builds up to the level of the scholar and the healer. You start studying Chinese medicine and, which is the theory of an energetic body, as something else. And that led to more and more associations and sparked an interest in occultism, Chinese occultism. But in the West, there's not really much written about this. It's not something you can find. There are a few references in some books, some ideas. Like, for example, Kenneth Grant, I think he wrote about a ritual he supposedly did in London, in a place called Limehouse, which was a famous Chinese community in London at one time. And I learned some ideas from this. I think, well, there might actually be a Chinese tradition I'm not really aware of. Okay, so I want to further investigate these matters. There being nothing in English, and and even the Chinese friends that I had in the martial arts community I spoke to, and they don't really know anything about it. It's not a very well-known thing even among Chinese communities, except by popular movies. Like Hong Kong movies, they might show sort of like supernatural, and they get their, and a lot of Chinese get their ideas from these movies. Like some bangsha, like a top and then killing vampires or something. So I don't, I was at the time I was in the military as well. I was I was in the Royal Navy, which gave me an opportunity to explore different countries, which I did. I went to Norway and near the North Pole, and sort of the amazing Northern Lights and all that sort of thing.
Beautiful, yeah.
But I also went to Singapore, and that's when I first saw my real. That was my first real introduction to Chinese religious culture, but not really the esoteric side, but the public Taoism, which is in the temples, which does have an esoteric side, but it's mainly like an organization based around a temple. They have a main deity, for example, like Guan Yin, for example, and this is my first introduction. But going into these temples, I really felt something, touch me. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more about the experience, how it touched you? Like the initial thing that moved you into this path.
Okay, so for example, well, it's been building up.
Sure.
So you have to understand that it was like, I don't like to use the word destiny, not in the Western sense, but in the Chinese sense, benming, which is
benming,
which is a feeling of this is right. And it seems like there was a series of events which led me into this path. So I don't feel it was just it was like a kaiyang, open your eyes,
right?
That's something else. So I went into this temple, it was a Guan Yin temple. Actually, I'd met a girl and she took me to this Guan Yin temple. It had the lilies, and we put them in the thing. And I thought, and I could smell the incense, and there was a drum beating in the background, like boom, 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 boom. My heart was resonating with it, and I felt this incredible, a sensation of oneness, almost out of myself, a loss of identity, and a temporary obliteration of the self. And I thought, and I felt really amazing, and I thought,
at this Guan Yin temple.
Yeah. And this is my first introduction to that vibe, if you like, vibration. It's hard to explain exactly. Some of these experiences are really hard to put into words. It can only be done. It can only be done like ideally by poetry and art and music. It's not something that you can always verbalize.
Yeah, I understand, but we try our best to still try to verbalize these experiences.
Yes. So that was for me, something touched me. And
beautiful.
maybe it was a catalyst, maybe even a literal Shenggong, even though I didn't realize it then. So that's my first introduction, but that's really exoteric religion, you know, not really what I was looking for exactly. I just didn't merely want to be a worshipper, which was a participator, an explorer of unseen worlds.
Yes.
Okay. And to have a more total knowledge. And speaking to different people in Singapore at that time, I realized that maybe the public temples, you know, what most people would call Taoism in inverted commas, is not really what I'm looking for, even though it does give an open window to that vibration. It's hard to put into words. So, but unfortunately, I was in the Navy at the time, you know, and if I run away to the, you know, to Asia, they'll send police to look for me, you know.
Yeah, of course.
So I had to, you know, so I had to return to the ship. But at that point, I vowed to myself that I will return to Asia and I will look for a real teacher. Okay. So at home, I did some research, you know, and still not really finding much because there's not a lot in the Western books. You know, the Chinese themselves are quite secretive about these things. You know, they have been for a long time.
And also, a lot of the roots has been just severed.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that take advantage of this ignorance of people. Sure. Because people don't really know what Chinese are really doing at this time. So there's a lot of fakery going on, you know, like people claiming these traditions which aren't really existent because people don't know any better. So I found I needed to solve that problem too.
How can you tell? How do you solve this problem? How do you know who's fake and who's not?
That's a really good question, right? Mainly because when you compare, let's say, the output of some guys like mixing Chinese ideas with the Kabbalah or this kind of thing, it's not fake exactly. It's all good intentioned, but it's presenting knowledge in such a way that it's ripped from its cultural context and presented in another way, which is unfair to the audience, if you see what I mean. So they're not getting the pearl, you know, but rather having it embedded in a, you know, out of cultural context. So traveling to Asia for me was a vital thing to do, to find someone who could actually really show me a path. Okay, there were two things that I was worried about. Number one, like John Wen Yi Dian Dian. Yeah, so only a little bit at that time, all right? And the second thing is I'm Lao white. Well, you know, so and I'm very white, you know, I had blonde hair and everything. So you know, I couldn't even pass as like a, you know, so I knew this was going to be a problem. So my first choice was Singapore. Why Singapore? Easy answer. Okay, English. Now people speak a lot of English, you know, so but they also speak Mandarin, Putonghua and Hakka, you know. So in this way, I could find a teacher who could teach me in English, and I could learn the Mandarin terms at the same time, which is exactly what happened. So after leaving the Navy, I'd saved some money, and I should point out that in Asia, you know, well, put it this way, in the West, we tend to think of spiritual knowledge as something, you know, that should be free, you know, something that should be freely given away with no financial exchange at all. In Asia, not going to happen. You know, there's usually has to be a fair exchange of, you know, money. You know, so my first teacher, a Singaporean guy, I won't say his name just yet because it's not fair to him. So my first teacher was in Singapore, and he was a Maoshan teacher. Maoshan being a kind of folk magic, which came from
Maoshan道士is very famous.
And this is what I'm a practitioner of. Okay.
Okay.
So, why Maoshan? Because maybe it's because of the popularity in Asia, you know, and the schools are quite well preserved compared with many. Yeah. But it's also distinct enough from Orthodox Taoism to have some of those original things, you know, which Taoism, Orthodox popular Taoism now lacks. Yeah, all right. So anyway, I studied under him for a couple of years, and it was expensive. You know, it's like when I first was, oh God, you know, but you know. But you know, yeah,
they usually charge quite a lot.
Yeah, but it's okay. You know, this guy also had to pay that money to another teacher, and so on. And it's been like this for generations. If you go back to the original, I suppose, Taoism, magical Taoism, that would be Zhang Daolin, one of the first celestial masters. And you had to pay like 5 bags of rice, you know.
五斗米教啊。
对。So he paid these 5 bags of rice, and so it's always been a term of respect, you know. I mean, even when we enter the door, you know, 开门, you know, or 传, you know, we offer tea, which is something you're good at, I heard. We offer the tea out of respect and give some food and some fruits and some money, this kind of thing. Okay. So I learned under him for 2 years, and I learned a lot, and in English and in Mandarin. So I built up my Taoist vocabulary quite well. But then he was quite limited in what he was teaching. He has a very narrow system, which is based on something called Liu Jia Lou Ding, which is like a family of spirits, if you like, that represent.
Liu Jia Lou Ding. I haven't heard of this. I'm not.
Yeah, they represent time and space. You must know, you know, the hours. Yeah, like Zhe. Yeah, right. So they represent this. You know, the.
Liu Jia Lou Ding.
Yeah, the 12th teacher, you know, from the old Chinese clock. But they have a huge important significance in the same way that astrological signs and planets do in Western astrology. Okay. So really, the first system I learned is the Liu Jia Lou Ding system, which was based around some ancient books like a Tian Shu Jing. Yeah, Tian Shu Jing, a heavenly classic, you know, heaven book classic or something like that. So learning that system, you know, was really great, you know, and even though it did cost me money, I was okay with that. And he was a genuine teacher too, you know, with a provable lineage. But I decided I need to know more, and the best way to learn more is to find the roots of something. Yeah.
So what did you do?
I went to China, right? So, which was an experience in itself. You know, there's far less people speaking English, for example. So, and there is a culture of suppression, oppression. A lot of people argue that this is not the case, but it is. The reason why they argue it's not the case it's because they see the public Taoism, like the Wudan and places like this, all the people doing the Tai Chi and stuff like that. And so, well, Taoism's not suppressed. But yeah, that's true to a certain extent. But it's
that's a fun story.
Yeah, it's a certain kind of government-approved Taoism, and they've taken a lot of the magical
esoteric
stuff,
part,
and thrown it away.
Yeah.
But I knew the roots would be there somewhere, and I was right. So I got a job as an English teacher while I was there, to earn money while I was, looking for a teacher for myself. Now, even though it's oppressed by the government, they say, no, you can't do the occult. Yeah, you can't be doing magic. It's against the government. And there is a small occult underground, in China, of people who preserve the old ways. Yeah,
I'll be very surprised if I find things like that in China. But tell me, because I tried to reach out for these people. But
I mean,
I don't
they
find
are
them.
they are there.
Okay.
You just have to look for them in the right way. Obviously, by guanxi, networking with different people.
Sure.
It was the way I did it. Okay, is by social media, like Weibo, Weixin, this kind of thing. And you have the first point of call for me were booksellers who were selling illegal books. Yeah, they were illegal, on esoteric aspects of Chinese occultism, Chinese witchcraft, if you like. And I was contacting these people and I was asking, are there any, do you know anyone who teaches this stuff? And mostly people say no, that for obvious reasons, I'm a white guy, and B, I could be anyone. I could be the police. Yeah, right. And I pretty much gave that up. But that's when I met Vicky. Vicky Wen, who is my wife now. And she's the one said, well, actually, part of my family still preserves a tradition. Yeah. And that's when, it's like in a small village in Hunan province, quite near a place called Henshan, which is like the Hen Mountain.
Henshan, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when I met Master Liang. Yeah. And because I was, me and Vicky, were very close, and he can see I'm making her happy and she's making me happy. He said, okay, I'll show you some things, and that's when I entered that tradition. Yao Qi, which is Jasper Lake, I believe is the translation. Yao Zhi Mao Shan. And that's when I started to learn. And I haven't stopped since. I stayed there for 12 years learning, from master to teacher, because not many people were wanting to learn, it's a dying art. There were some dangers to learning it because you're in a culture where oppression is, it's not something you can do publicly. Yeah. And he felt that, Chinese care more about money, these days, which is kind of true, It's not just Chinese, it's Western people too, as well. It's the world, not just China. And so I did my lessons over 12 years, he gave me permission to translate manuscripts, the result of one of which is that book. And so And I think this is a really, and I felt that he felt that that eventually I can take this to the West and preserve it, because in China, it's not going to be preserved for very long. And that's our story. So me and Vicky moved back to the United Kingdom when the new president came into power, because we felt that the oppression was getting...
Yeah. So when was that? How many years have you been on this path?
Oh, that's 3 years ago. So I've been in the United Kingdom 3 years now.
So how was your experience coming back to the West?
You know, it's really strange. Like when I first went to China, it was a bit of a culture shock. When I come back, I have a second culture shock, readjusting to Western life. Yeah, man. Yeah. Like I was so unused to eating Western food, you know, and drinking Western tea. You know, every day I was like drinking guanyin, you know, and pu'er, and now it's like back to, you know, coffee and tea. Well, I still drink Chinese tea, don't get me wrong, but you know.
I have a lot of really nice tea about here. I'm really into tea ceremony. So,
yeah, hua cha is quite nice. Yeah. Well, anyway, so so I had a second culture shock when I got back, you know. So in many ways, I'm still settling back into the United Kingdom, you know, because I'd immersed myself into Chinese culture, and I lived as a Chinese basically, you know, for more or less 13 years, you know, so including Singapore and China, you know, so a total of 15 years outside the United Kingdom. So
I've noticed that your work has been very well received in the West.
I hope so. But then there are many opponents as well who have this different idea of what Taoism is, you know. So it's a bit unsettling to them, you know. So
can you elaborate a bit about that? I'm just curious.
Okay. It's the way that Taoism has been adapted and presented in the West. There's a few routes. The first one is the Orientalist tradition of literature. You know, Western guy goes to China and studies it from an academic point of view, without an experiential point of view. Sometimes with especially in the early days, with certain academic biases, you know, or even Christian biases, you know, like, the Chinese worship this demon god, you know, with many arms, and, you know, this sort of thing. Excuse me. Some of the early literature is, you know, talking about, you know, these barbaric practices of the Chinese and things like that. So that's your first avenue. It's like a complete misrepresentation of Chinese culture from a Christian missionary point of view. A second route is Taoist missionaries from China, usually from China. So they have
Taoist missionaries to the West.
Yeah,
they
do
happen.
Of this. Yeah, especially through the avenue of Chinese martial arts, often associated with Tai Chi Chuan and things like that.
Yeah.
But again, it gives a very one-sided viewpoint of what I call orthodox Taoism, which would be like, for example, Roman Catholics going to Taiwan and saying, "Oh, this is the Western spiritual tradition, but it's nothing else. You know, only this." Yeah.
Okay, understandable. Right. Yeah.
But you wouldn't get, say, for example, Wicca goes to Taiwan. Maybe you would now, but in the past, no. Right? You wouldn't get someone who studies Wicca or Western witchcraft go to Taiwan and say, "Well, this is Wicca," even though I understand there are practitioners now in Taiwan. And it's the same with the Chinese Taoism. So, and Taoism is a loose word as well, because Taoism covers so many things.
True.
Okay. So the kind of Taoism that I do, and I use Taoism in inverted commas because I don't really like this word. Yeah, because it puts you in a box which you don't really belong in. Okay. The essence of the Taoism I do is contact with the spirit world. Okay. Self-evolution of the self and helping other people to achieve this. Okay. So the self-evolution of the self is through self-understanding and alchemy, Neigong. Okay. Not Qigong, that's a modern thing. Neigong. Okay. Which we have several unique processes like Fuluhua, burn the drink, spirit essences. I don't know how to maybe Ling Jing, maybe. No, right? Spirit essence. So so we have these ideas of self-development as well as meditation and what other Taoists would do, I guess. But we also have this idea of Shengong, which means we allow divine forces to become spirit, if you like, Ling, Ren, joined together as one. And when they part again, there's something left behind, which you learn from. This is a very important part of a distinction between Orthodox Taoism and it's almost shamanic, which is something you might understand. We have that trance work, we will be doing the shaking and, which you might be familiar with. We have that trance work and travel to the spirit realms, not merely metaphorically, but actually. Okay, through all the things that you might understand, sometimes sound like rhythmic mantras, or sometimes by a repeated jiao, and through use of mudra, I say mudra, but I mean xiao yin, this kind of thing. And other aspects as well, which I can't discuss. So we have these ideas as well as part of self-development. It's not just merely Neigong, but contact with spirits, immortals, gods. And also ancestors. Ancestral work is really important as well to our tradition. And the spirit of the land, Tudi, which is also very important part of what we do. Every land has its own spirit, and there's nothing we can do. We can't do anything without its permission first, the spirit of the land, and that's when the magic happens. So we're linking all these three things together, as you know, Santai, which is like the three powers, man, heaven, earth, and we link all these three things together in what we do.
Beautiful.
And then we have the service aspect. We don't just do it for ourselves. This is selfish. Okay. We have to give merit to other people. And these services can be healing, giving people better conditions. Healing doesn't just mean bodily disease or mental we consider, for example, things like bad luck all the time, ill fortune, no money, as also a kind of disease. Sometimes for whole generations, and we believe that sometimes this is due to the fact that there's no continuity with the ancestors, especially in the West, so when you break that continuity, there's a lot lost. Right. So this is a really important idea too. For us, Taoist magic, if you like. I say Taoist. The reason I called the book Chinese practical magic rather than Taoist Chinese magic.
This book?
Yeah.
Practical
The reason
Chinese
I call it,
magic.
yeah, the reason I call it practical Chinese magic is so people don't confuse it with Orthodox Taoism. Yeah.
It's really fascinating what you describe in the book. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about this book, Practical Chinese Magic?
Oh, okay, right. What can I say about it? Right, the title might seem like a strange one because it's very straightforward. You know, there's no messing around with this title because it almost sounds like it's a book that would be corny. You know, like something you would buy in you know, a lot of people expect it to be, you know, oh, it's just another Western interpretation of, you know, Chinese culture, you know, but that's not my aim. The aim was to give you a genuine representation of actually what Chinese really do. Yeah, you know. So in the first part of the book, I explored a basic history of it and some of the and the difference between Orthodox and folk Taoism. You know, Taoism of the people. Yeah, you know. So this is a really important distinction to make because I think folk Taoism more represents what Taoism was originally. Okay.
Can you give us some examples? Are there any examples of this?
Of the difference?
Yes.
Okay. So for example, right, just looking at the history of Taoism. Okay. Now, I think, okay, and a lot of scholars think that Taoism, in the legends, Taoism begins with Lao Tzu, right? You know, the famous scholar, you know, who we call Taishang Laozhong in our tradition, which is like the spiritual aspect of which Lao Tzu was only a kind of earthly incarnation, but there's been several, okay? But we argue actually that's probably not true, even though it is in a certain sense, in a spiritual history sense. The real origins of Taoism go back to very deep, not hidden, very deep, almost unknown Chinese culture, where everything began as a kind of shamanism, which is which can date at least back to the Shang dynasty. Okay.
Xiaoshanzong is all it's all shamanic culture.
Yeah.
We do have a very
so I think Taoism was originally a congealing of shamanic knowledge. Okay, and a lot of the terms like, you know, yin yang, bagua, and all this sort of thing come from a shamanic worldview, an understanding of spirit of our reality. You can look back in some of the older books even in the Confucian classic, like the Book of Nine Songs, where it describes a definite shamanic relationship between the worshipper beating drums and wearing horned masks, and, you know.
Oh my God, even I don't know this.
Wow, you're learning now. Wearing the mirrors, you know, beautiful clothes.
That came from 九歌, the Nice Songs.
Yeah.
Seriously, I have to look up.
Yeah, read it again in a different light.
Wow.
And so, you know, it gives you, if you read it carefully, it gives ritual instructions of the dancing girls and, you know, and the guy with the horned headdress, and, you know. So, to call this, you know, the spirits of the rivers and the mountains, and, you know, almost like a love song, you know, which is a very beautiful thing. So Taoism sort of had, I think, wasn't just suddenly founded in this school of 100 philosophies, for example, sometime in the 4th century. I think it was a development from shamanism, and it kept, and even celestial master Zhang Daoling kept and preserved that tradition. But what happened next was 2 things. The first one was imperialism. Yeah. So there was the emperor, whoever that may have been, I'm talking about the office, not any specific emperor.
Yeah.
Had to imperialize everything, put it in a box, control it. Okay, that's the first step towards I don't want to say despiritualization, because Taoism is still spiritual. Imperialism was the first step in the change in Taoism, if you like, from its shamanic roots. Okay, which is basically just contact with the spirits, divining through dreams, finding out problems on earth which may have an underlying spiritual pathology.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the original shamanic roots. Then the second thing that happened was Buddhism. Yeah, Buddhism came in from through India, and into China during the Tang Dynasty, I believe, round about then. And this had a huge influence on the way Taoism was presented. Now, if you go to a public temple today and you look at the Taoist rituals, most of them have a Buddhist influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the point where it's not really the original Taoism. Chanting sutras or sutras, beating the fish block, like this is Buddhist.
That's Buddhism. Yeah, it's all mixed up.
Yeah, the very idea of temple is Buddhist.
Yeah.
And a monastery, Buddhist. No sex, Buddhist. Yeah, all these ideas, were imported from Buddhism into, to basically change the nature of Taoism. So there was a competition between these schools, Buddhism and Taoism, and to compete with the Buddhist schools, Taoism, the nature of the way that Taoism was presented changed. And that's been, for me, that's one of the chief problems. But saying that, it's also had some positive influences as well on certain ideas, so it's a bit of give and take there. So that's so to say Taoism, the question is, which Tao are you talking about? Yeah, we're talking about a folk Taoism, which developed from local traditions in village wisdom, if you like, but also accepted some ideas from conventional Taoism and Buddhism. For example, in our tradition, we have Guan Yin, and we have Buddha Amitabha, the Western Paradise. These are obviously Buddhist ideas.
Yeah.
But I believe that we retain more of the original practices in terms of spiritual contact than you won't see much Shengong in an Orthodox temple. Now, there is one phenomenon that is more, that to me seems to resemble the primal Taoism, if you like, and that would be the modern Tanqi phenomena.
We have a lot of that in Taiwan.
Yeah. Even though it gets a bit silly. Yeah, there's a lot of acting going on.
Medium.
Basically. Yeah. A lot of the Tanqi have that kind of Shengong thing going on, and that's closer to some of the ideas of early shamanic Taoism.
But they would like they will hurt themselves and to prove like they're invincible and things like that.
Yeah, this is where I think it gets a little bit silly, but no, silly is not the right word, but it can get to the point where it's not real Shengong, it's people acting trying to prove their own egos rather than, having a real Shengong, particularly in modern times. Yeah, it becomes a commercial venture again.
Yeah.
A lot of these Tanki people want the dollars, but there are real ones who are genuine mediums of the gods. You can learn a lot from. Right? So I think the Tanki phenomena which is interesting in itself as a sociological phenomena. You have the Taoist temples, the orthodox ones like the Jenny, Guanzhen, and these guys, others as well. You don't have to be rich to be there, but there's a certain level of education you need and a certain eliteness that you need to be in that, sector, And to be a priest in Jenny will be very expensive, for example, right? But the Tanki was something that developed among the common people. It was a reaction against the elitism of, what I would call middle class, upper class temple life, So that in itself is interesting, Right. So.
I've also noticed that you published other 2 books. It's really fascinating. The Thunder Magic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Thunder Magic was
talk a bit about what is Thunder Magic?
Okay, right. This one, again, these things are really hard, right? So, Leifa, or Leifa, which is like
Lace.
the best. Okay, I'm trying to find the best words to explain it.
It's okay. Yeah.
Because people think, thunder magic, you're calling the thunder, you have like lightning come out of your hands and that sort of thing, which is ridiculous, In the movies, maybe.
But this is not about that.
Yeah. Leifa is a kind of Neigong.
Leifa. So thunder magic is a kind of Neigong. So it's a kind of like martial art in the alchemy.
Yeah, it's a kind of inner alchemy, but it touches with nature. Okay, thunder or lightning, symbolizes the power of heaven and earth uniting.
I see. Yeah.
Okay, so we're not literally called, and which is literally true in physics. Yeah, that's what thunder actually, lightning and thunder and lightning is this like interaction between earth and heaven. It's been proven by modern science this has a certain function in our ecology, which is really important.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember reading. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this itself is an approachable idea, but it represents a certain yang energy. Okay, which can be really useful through cultivation. So Leifa is, to summarize, a kind of yoga, if you like. Yeah, right. Where you access heavenly yang energies, which can really be symbolized by the Bagua. There's one called Zhen, which means thunder. If you study the trigram of Zhen, you'll understand a lot of the secrets of Leifa and reality. Now, this book was only an introduction. There's I could write a book that's thick on Leifa because it's been a basis of basic magic in the Chinese tradition for since the Song Dynasty at least, which is centuries old. So I think Leifa was a good introduction to some ideas of Chinese magic and the way it's empowered. Yeah, one of the engines, if you like, or batteries of magical ability, Lingfa.
Such as what kind of magical abilities?
Okay. Healing is the big one. Okay, so healing is the most important one. Okay, getting rid of bad energies. For example, in feng shui. Okay, because it's all interlinked, by the way.
Yeah.
This is one of the problems of modern, even in China and Malaysia and places like this. These arts have become kind of separated. You know, I'm learning Qigong Dunjia. I'm learning Ziwei. I'm learning Qigong. I'm learning Neigong. You know, and I'm learning Leifa. And they become different arts, but you know, but they should all be one. You know, they all interlink. So, for example, if you have a feng shui problem, for example, there's a yin energy. Now, most people will think of yin energies as not being a good thing, but we mean that in a certain way. Okay, not that yin is bad, but maybe it's in the wrong place sometimes. So you can heal an environment through Leifa by injecting yang energies into it. Or a lot of illnesses could be cured with Leifa. Like, for example, I'm trying to think of one particular, like this is something like the flu or something. You can help, you know, that energy. I've seen it for myself, so I know it works. And there are other aspects to Leifa, which the more controversial aspects, what I guess would be Chuxie, exorcism.
Exorcism?
Yeah.
Have you ever done it before? Have you ever done one before?
I prefer not to discuss it, but
okay.
You know,
Okay.
But I've seen it done. Okay. I don't really talk about my own practices much, because in the Western occult community, if you make these claims, they can, you know, people want empirical evidence. This is the Western culture. Okay. You know.
They can be quite aggressive sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't want to get involved in those, you know.
I understand
debates,
totally.
You know.
Totally understand.
I know what I know, and I know what I can do, and that's enough for me. And I don't have to prove it to anyone.
As a person coming from Chinese culture, all of this is so just finding how ignorant I am, and
no, don't.
And just like for example, of all of these things that you mentioned, you mentioned about 奇门遁甲, right?
Yeah.
Like, so what is that? I've heard of it before, but I have no idea what 奇门遁甲 is.
Okay, right. 奇门遁甲 is an interesting one, actually. Okay. I'll tell you a story, put it into context. Wow. According to legend, there was a time when the world, maybe just meaning China, okay, was under threat. Forces of chaos, the forces of non-chaos were battled. Now, the forces of chaos were represented by a demon king called Qiao Yi. And the forces of non-chaos were represented by Huangdi, Yellow Emperor. But the forces of chaos caused a great darkness across the earth. Okay, there was fear and there was terror. Yeah. And the Yellow Emperor was losing battles, and he fled. The Yellow Emperor hid in the mountains, and you know, he was a great man, and he was scared, you know, and so he prayed to the heavens, said, "Oh, so it was like, oh, you know, help me, and what can I do, you know." You know, you could hear if you imagine, look like Lord of the Rings, you know, like, you know, all these monsters beating drums, like boom, 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 right? There's some controversy to this, by the way, right? But I won't talk about that now. But the legend is a nice one anyway. So his prayers are answered, and suddenly through this darkness, there's this beautiful woman, yeah, and her name is 九天玄女, okay, which for Western audience translates roughly as ninth heaven mysterious girl or woman, depending how you want to
very
put it.
popular now in Taiwan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and obviously, and usually in the wrong way too, right? Okay, they portrayed Zhou Tianshuan almost like a kind of Guan Yin figure. No, she wasn't. Yeah, right. So this is what I mean by popular Taoism. It's turned her into something which she really isn't. She was an occult master, yeah, a goddess of war and a goddess of sexuality, yeah. She taught the Yellow Emperor various things to help his war against darkness and chaos. Some of these things included various magical systems. Okay, another one was alchemy, and strangely enough, sexuality as well, sexual alchemy. Yeah, which you won't find people discussing in Taiwan, Zhou Tianshuan new temples, you know.
Really?
Probably not, no. Because it's presented in such a different way, you know. Okay, so Zhou Tianshuan was also taught the Yellow Emperor this system, Qi Men Dun Jia. Okay. It's really hard to translate.
From her. I didn't know that Qi Men Dun Jia came from Zhou Tianshuan.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because it has a different, well, let me explain. So Qi kind of means surprising, you know, shocking, you know, wow. Yeah. And men obviously means door. And dun means to hide or escape. Okay. And so these ideas, qi men dun jia, means a way, a rough translation would be like strange doors escaping technique. Yeah, but it's a really bad translation. It's the nearest one we can get.
So what is it?
Okay.
Actually, what is it about?
It's two things.
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, it's a system of divination, but not like tarot cards or anything like that.
More like
this divination analyzes qi, the way the energy of earth, of man, of the world of man and the world of heaven interact on a certain level. It's a study of energies, okay, which lie behind the physical veil of reality. By interpreting the way these currents are flowing, yeah, through certain, we draw up plates like a tian pan, di pan, and ren pan. We can analyze the how things are working, and what we can do next. That's the most important thing. Is qi men. It's not just divination. Like, oh yeah, you know, you're screwed. Right? We offer solutions as well, strategies. So the most important thing about qi men dan jia is it's not just divination. It offers what you should do. It offers strategies. Okay, so it became a very popular tool among Chinese generals. Yeah, later years. Sure. So I suppose a famous one is Kong Ming. You know.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Kong Ming was used qi men dun jia to sanguo, to kind of work out different things, different strategies for the war. But more than that, qi men dun jia traditionally taught. Okay. But today, qi men dun jia has mainly become a kind of divination, often used by businessmen and feng shui guys. But there's more to qi men dun jia. Qi men dun jia is a magical system. Okay. Some of the solutions that offers can use, for example, feng shui methods. Okay, which is ways of manipulating your environment. Okay, to arranging things in an environment. It can use talismans, fulu. Yeah. It can use things as, like you can use music even, played at certain, or the way you sit, what direction you face when you do certain things. For example, I heard some quite good stories about my teacher, being when he was a young man, being very naughty. He used Chiman Dunjia to win at mahjong, by sitting in the right position, and he got told off for this. But so Chiman Dunjia is also a magical system, but that part of it's becoming gradually rarer. The most famous part of Chiman Dunjia is using lights or lamps, dong, bei do dong, which are like lamps which represent the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper, bei do, but there's also Nando as well, but I won't go into that. So bei do, for example, is the Northern Dipper to Western guys. It's tied in with our fate and our destiny in a certain way. And by using certain, what we call jun arrays, jun like mean a battle array, I guess.
Yeah.
We can arrange dipper lamps according to Chiman Dunjia readings, whereby we can change the outcome of fate or destiny.
Interesting.